I need you to understand something before I tell you the rest. I'm not the kind of person who believes in things. I never was. I was the kid who checked the closet to prove there was nothing inside. I was the guy who rolled his eyes at ghost stories and said things like infrasound and pattern recognition and your brain is filling in gaps. I need you to know that because what I'm about to tell you doesn't care what kind of person I am. It happened, and I've spent the last 7 months trying to find a single rational explanation that holds together for more than 5 minutes, and I can't. Not one. It started with a dead man's house. Our great-uncle Vernon died in April. Heart failure, they said, alone on his property in southeastern Utah, a patch of land so far from anything that the county sheriff didn't find him for 9 days. Vernon had no wife, no children, no friends anyone knew about. He'd lived out there for 30 years, and in all that time, I'd met him exactly twice. Both times at family funerals. He was tall, thin, sun-darkened, and quiet in a way that felt deliberate, like he'd made a decision a long time ago to stop wasting words. My mother said he was eccentric. My father said he was running from something. Nobody ever asked Vernon which one it was. He left the property to my mother, who wanted nothing to do with it, so the job of cleaning it out fell to Marcus and me. Marcus is my older brother, 29, the kind of person who organizes group trips and then pretends he's not the one who organized them. He suggested we make a weekend of it. Bring Elena, his girlfriend, and Danny, my best friend since 7th grade. Road trip, Marcus said. Fresh air, stars. We box up the old man's stuff, get the place ready to list, and we're home by Monday. It sounded simple. Everything sounds simple before. We left Flagstaff on a Thursday morning in a rented Chevy Tahoe, windows down, Danny riding shotgun controlling the music, which meant we were listening to 90s hip-hop, and Danny's commentary, which was better than the music. Elna sat behind Marcus, reading something on her phone. She'd been quiet since we'd crossed into Utah, but Elena was often quiet, so I didn't think much about it. The highway gave way to a state road. The state road gave way to a county road. The county road gave way to dirt. 43 miles of dirt, I counted. The land opened up like something breathing out. Red rock mesas climbed on either side, strided with millions of years of patience. And between them, nothing just sage and juniper and the occasional skeletal cottonwood clinging to a dry wash. The sky was so big it made me feel like the roof had been taken off the world. Danny stopped talking around mile 20. We all did. There was something about the landscape that made conversation feel small. Presumptuous, almost, like speaking too loudly in a cathedral. Cell service died at mile 16. I watched the bars vanish one by one, like candles being blown out. Well, Danny said, holding up his phone, if we die out here, nobody's finding us either. Marcus laughed. I laughed too. Elatina didn't. She was looking out the window at the mesas, her forehead nearly touching the glass, and there was something in her expression, not fear, exactly. Recognition. Like she'd seen terrain like this before and knew what it meant. She'd grown up in Farmington, New Mexico, just south of the Navajo Nation. I remembered that, but I didn't connect it to anything, not yet. The road narrowed. I noticed there were no other tire tracks. Not fresh ones, not old ones. Just the road, 2 faded ruts in the hard pan, and the sage pressing in from both sides like it was trying to reclaim the path. I had the strange feeling that we weren't driving on the land so much as the land was allowing us to pass through it. We arrived a little before 5. The sun was low and gold, and the shadows of the mesas stretched across the property like long fingers. The ranch house was smaller than I expected. Stone walls, rough-cut timber beams, a corrugated tin roof gone rust brown. It looked less like a home and more like something the landscape had grown up. A callus formed over decades of wind and sun. A windmill stood behind it, the blades turning slowly in a breeze I couldn't feel. To the south, a collapsed livestock pen, the posts gray and splintered. To the east, a small shed with a padlock. And beyond everything, the canyon. I hadn't expected it to be so close. Maybe 80 yards from the back of the house, the earth just ended. A sheer drop into red and orange sandstone, 200 feet straight down, opening into a system of branching gorges that snaked away toward the horizon. The scale of it was difficult to process. It was like someone had taken a knife to the surface of the world and peeled back a layer to show what was underneath. Marcus whistled. Vernon had one hell of a view. He wasn't wrong, but there was something about standing at the edge, the way the canyon seemed to swallow sound, the way the shadows at the bottom were already deep enough to be black, even though sunset was an hour away, that made me step back. Not consciously, my body just decided it had been close enough. Inside, the house smelled like dust and old paper and something faintly animal, not rot, more like the ghost of living things. Dried sweat, leather, wool. Vernon's life was everywhere, books stacked on every surface, topographic maps pinned to the walls with thumbtacks, the paper yellowed and curling. Jars on shelves, some with dried herbs, some with rocks and crystals, some with things I couldn't identify. A Navajo blanket folded over the back of a chair, a wood stove in the corner, cold, and by the front door, leaning against the wall, a rifle. A bolt action .30-06, old but clean. Unloaded, I checked, but positioned the way you position something you needed to reach in a hurry. Danny found the Polaroids in a kitchen drawer, a dozen of them, faded and curling. Vernon, at various ages, always on the property, always alone. Standing by the windmill, sitting on the porch, leaning against the shed. In every single photograph, his expression was the same. Not sad, not angry, not peaceful. Watchful. Like something just out of frame had his attention. "Cheery guy," Danny said, fanning the photos like playing cards. Marcus was already in organization mode, opening boxes, stacking papers, making piles of keep and discard. "Let's get the bedroom sorted before dark. We'll hit the shed and the outbuilding tomorrow." I went outside to get another load from the SUV and found Elena standing at the canyon rim. Not at the edge, maybe 10 feet back, but facing it, arms crossed, perfectly still. The last of the sun was catching her hair, and the wind that had been absent all afternoon had picked up just slightly, carrying the smell of cold stone and sage. I walked up beside her. The canyon was filling with shadow from the bottom up, like dark water slowly rising. Somewhere far below, I thought I heard a sound, a faint scraping, or maybe just the wind moving through the narrows. I couldn't tell. "You okay?" I asked. Elena didn't look at me. She was staring at a point somewhere across the canyon, at the opposite rim, where the sandstone curved into a formation that looked, in the failing light, almost like a doorway. "My grandmother would never have come here," she said. I waited for her to explain. She didn't. I should have asked. That's one of the things I go back to. If I had asked, if she had told me then what she told me 2 days later, maybe we would have left that night. Maybe everything would be different. But I didn't ask, and she didn't offer. And we walked back inside, and I told myself the canyon was just a canyon, and the silence was just the desert, and the feeling I had that something in the landscape was aware of us was just my imagination adjusting to how empty the world could be when you got far enough from other people. We ate canned soup heated on the propane stove. Marcus got the generator running after 20 minutes of cursing, so we had light, a single bulb in the main room that buzzed and flickered and turned everything a sickly amber. We played cards. Danny dealt and told a story about a road trip he'd taken with his college roommate that ended with both of them accidentally locked inside a Walmart overnight. And by the end, Elena was laughing so hard she couldn't breathe, and even Marcus, who was competitive about everything, including card games, was grinning. And for a little while, the house felt like just a house, and we felt like just 4 people at the edge of an adventure. Around 11, the coyotes started. That part was normal. Desert at night, you hear coyotes. Yipping, howling, the sound bouncing off the rock walls and multiplying until it seemed like there were hundreds of them. Thousands, their voices filling the canyon like water fills a vessel. Danny tilted his head and listened. "Nature's soundtrack," he said. "Very atmospheric." Then they stopped, not gradually, not winding down. They stopped mid-howl, all of them, simultaneously, as if someone had pressed a button. 1 second the night was full of sound, and the next, nothing. Not quiet, nothing. No insects, no wind, no settling of the house, no creak of timber, no hum from the generator, which I realized had also died at the same instant, plunging us into darkness until Marcus found the lantern. In the lantern light, we all looked at each other. Danny's smile was still on his face, but it had frozen there, and his eyes were doing something different. "Okay," he said quietly. "That was weird." Marcus got the generator restarted. The light came back. The moment passed. We told ourselves it was a coincidence. The generator was old. The coyotes had just moved on. The desert was a strange place at night. We went to bed. I slept in the back room, Vernon's storage room, cleared enough for a cot. The window faced east, toward the mesa. I lay there in the dark, listening to Marcus's low murmur from the main bedroom as he talked to Elena, listening to Danny's breathing from the couch in the living room. I don't know what time it was when I woke up, late, the kind of dark that has weight to it. I didn't wake from a sound. I've thought about this a lot, and I'm certain of it. There was no sound. What woke me was a feeling, a pressure, the absolute bone-deep conviction that something was standing outside the window, 6 inches from the glass, facing me. I didn't open my eyes. I don't know why. Some part of me that was older and smarter than the rest of me understood that if I opened my eyes and saw what was there, something would change that could never be changed back. So I lay still. I controlled my breathing. I pressed my face into the pillow, and I waited. The feeling lasted approximately 10 minutes. Then it lifted not suddenly, but like a tide going out, receding. And in the silence that followed, I heard something I've never been able to explain. A sound from the canyon, distant, low, almost below the threshold of hearing. Not a voice, not an animal, a hum, a vibration that I felt more in my chest than my ears, like the earth itself was resonating at a frequency that meant something I couldn't translate. It faded. The normal sounds of night returned: a faint wind, the creak of the windmill, something small moving through the sage. I didn't sleep again. In the morning, I told myself it was a dream. Hypnagogia, the disorientation of sleeping in a strange place. I almost believed it. Breakfast was coffee and granola bars, eaten standing up because Vernon didn't have a proper table. just a workbench covered in his papers. The morning was bright and cold, the air so dry it cracked my lips, and the landscape looked different in daylight. Smaller, manageable. The canyon was still there, of course, still enormous, still dropping into shadow, but with the sun on it, it looked like geology. Just rocks, just time made visible. We started cleaning in earnest. Marcus took the main room, I took Vernon's bedroom. Danny and Elena started on the kitchen. The work was monotonous and grounding filling boxes, stacking papers, sorting a dead man's possessions into categories of value and irrelevance. Vernon had lived simply. Most of what he owned was paper maps, journals, clipped articles, hand-drawn diagrams of things I didn't recognize. Around noon, a truck appeared on the road. We heard it before we saw it, the low rumble of a diesel engine and the crunch of tires on hardpan. An old Ford, white once, now the color of the dust it moved through. It pulled up to the house and a man climbed out slowly, the way people move when their joints have been arguing with them for decades. Harlan, that was the name he gave. He was in his 60s, maybe it was hard to tell. Sun-darkened skin, deep lines around his eyes, a jaw that looked like it had been carved from the same stone as the mesas. Mixed heritage, Ute and Anglo, I learned later, though he never said so himself. He wore a canvas jacket and a battered hat, and he didn't smile when he shook our hands. But his grip was firm and his eyes were steady, and there was nothing unfriendly about him. Just careful. Like a man who measured his words the way a carpenter measures wood, twice before cutting. He said Vernon had hired him years ago to check on the property every couple of weeks. Feed the generator, make sure the windmill was turning, keep the road passable. He'd been the one who found Vernon's body, though he didn't say this directly. He said, I was the one who called it in, and the rest was in the silence around the words. Marcus asked him about the property, the land, the history, the condition. Harlan answered in short, precise sentences. Yes, the well still worked. No, the shed roof needed replacing. Yes, there had been cattle once, a long time ago. Then Marcus asked, was Vernon happy out here? Harlan looked at Marcus for a long moment. Then he looked past him, toward the canyon, and something shifted in his face, not quite a flinch, but a tightening, like a door being closed behind his eyes. Vernon understood where he was, he said. He said it the way you'd say someone understood the ocean, or understood a loaded gun. Not with admiration, with acknowledgement. Harlan checked the windmill, topped off something in the generator. Walked the perimeter of the house once, slowly, looking at the ground. I watched him from the kitchen window and noticed he paused at the eastern wall. My wall, the wall my cot was against, and studied something in the dirt. Then he straightened up and came back to the front. He was leaving. He had one foot on the running board of his truck when he turned back and said three things, casually, like an afterthought, like he was reminding us to lock up when we left. Don't leave food outside. If you hear something at night, don't answer it. The canyon has its own sounds. They're not always real. Then he touched the brim of his hat, climbed into his truck, and drove away. We watched the dust trail until it was a pale thread against the mesa, and then it was gone, and we were alone again. Danny broke the silence first. He straightened up, squared his shoulders, dropped his voice an octave, and did a dead perfect impression of Harlan. The canyon has its own sounds. He looked at each of us with Harlan's exact squint. They're not always real. Marcus cracked up. I laughed too, because Danny was funny, because laughing felt good, because the alternative was to take seriously what a strange old man had just told us, that the sounds in the dark might be something other than sounds, and I wasn't ready to do that. Not in daylight, not with the sun on my face and the sky blue and the world making perfect rational sense. But I noticed Elena. She was standing in the doorway behind us, and she wasn't laughing. She wasn't even looking at Danny. She was watching the road, the empty road, the dust already settled, and her arms were crossed, and her jaw was tight. And she was watching the place where Harlan's truck had disappeared, with the expression of someone who has just watched the last lifeboat pull away from the ship. She saw me looking. Our eyes met. And in that half second, I saw something in her face that I couldn't name then and can only name now. She was afraid. Not startled, not anxious, not uncomfortable. Afraid. The kind of fear that comes from recognizing something you were hoping you were wrong about. She turned and went inside without a word. I stood there for a moment, alone in the sunlight, with the canyon at my back and the wind carrying the smell of sage and cold stone. And I felt for the first time, in a way I couldn't rationalize or dismiss, that we had made a mistake coming here. Not a logistical mistake, not a planning error, something deeper. Something that lived in the part of my brain that still remembered what it was like to be prey. But I went inside. I picked up a box. I kept packing. We had 2 more nights. The second day started the way second days do, with the illusion that the first night was an anomaly. Sunlight has a way of rewriting history. You wake up, the sky is clear, the coffee is hot, and the thing that had you rigid with fear at 3 in the morning becomes a funny story, an embarrassment, a thing you half remember and fully dismiss. I didn't mention the feeling at the window. I didn't mention the hum from the canyon. I told myself these things hadn't happened, and in the bright, dry, rational morning, I almost believed it. We worked. That was the plan, and Marcus was nothing if not a man who stuck to plans. We boxed and sorted and stacked. Vernon's possessions were strange, but not alarming in daylight. A library that leaned heavy on geology, anthropology, and southwestern history. Field guides for plants and animals, astronomical charts, a shelf of books in languages I didn't recognize. A collection of rocks arranged on a windowsill with a precision that suggested they weren't decorative. They were placed, intentionally, in a pattern I couldn't read. It was early afternoon when I found the journal. It was in the bottom drawer of a bureau in Vernon's bedroom, beneath a folded wool shirt that smelled like wood smoke and age. A simple composition notebook, the kind you'd buy at a gas station. Black cover, no label. I almost tossed it in the discard pile, but something made me open it. The first entry was dated 6 years ago. The handwriting was small, precise, almost architectural. It wasn't a diary. There were no feelings, no reflections, no narrative. It was a logbook. Date, weather, temperature, wind direction. Animal sightings, coyote, jackrabbit, mule deer, red-tailed hawk. Occasionally a note about the property. Windmill bearing needs grease. South fence post rotting. Generator fuel filter replaced. The entries were sparse, methodical, sometimes weeks apart. The record of a man who measured his world in facts and maintenance. Then, about 2 years in, something changed. A new word appeared, visitor. January 14th, visitor. 2 a.m., east side, February 3rd, visitor, canyon rim, just before dark. March 19th, visitor, closer tonight. No description, No elaboration, just the word, the time, and a location. The entries became more frequent, sometimes 3 or 4 a week. The handwriting stayed steady for a while, then began to tighten, the letters pressing harder into the page, the pen leaving grooves you could feel with your fingertip. In the final year, the logbook entries became erratic. Dates were sometimes missing. Weather observations disappeared. The animal sightings stopped entirely, not gradually, but all at once. As if one day there were animals on Vernon's land and the next day there weren't. The last page had only one entry, no date, just 7 words, written in handwriting that was no longer precise. It was shaking. The letters lurched and stumbled across the line like a man walking through a heavy wind. It knows my voice now. I stared at that sentence for a long time. Then I closed the notebook and found Marcus in the main room. "Look at this," I said. He read the last entry. He flipped back through the pages. He frowned, the way Marcus frowns when something doesn't fit into the category he's already assigned it. The slight narrowing of the eyes, the jaw shifting left. "Old man living alone for 30 years, Marcus said. No people, no television, no internet. Of course he started seeing things." He handed the notebook back. "You'd go crazy too." "He doesn't sound crazy," I said. "He sounds precise." "Precisely crazy." Marcus turned back to his boxes. "You want to pack up his paranoia? Be my guest. I'm finishing the kitchen." I didn't push it. That was my role in our family, the one who noticed things and then deferred to Marcus's certainty. I'd been doing it my whole life. I told myself he was probably right. A lonely old man, the desert, the silence, the dark. Of course you'd start populating the emptiness with visitors. But I kept the journal. I slid it into my bag, and I didn't tell Marcus. I'm not sure why. Maybe some part of me already knew it wasn't madness. Maybe I just wanted proof that I wasn't the only one who had felt something at that window. That afternoon, Danny went for a walk. He did that. Danny was restless by nature, the kind of person who needed to move, who thought better with his legs working. He said he was going to walk the canyon rim, take some photos, stretch out. Nobody thought anything of it. The sun was high and the landscape was open and we could see for miles in every direction. There was nothing to worry about. That's what I told myself. He was gone about 40 minutes. When he came back, something was different. Not dramatic, not a transformation, not a visible change. Just, the volume was lower. Danny's default setting was warmth and noise, a constant low hum of commentary and jokes and observations. When he walked back through the door, the hum was off. He sat down, he drank water. He looked at his hands. "You all right?" I asked. "Yeah." He paused, then, "I thought I heard someone down in the canyon." I waited. Like talking. Not yelling, not calling out. Just talking. A conversation. Like 2 people standing right next to each other, having a normal conversation. He looked up at me. "But there's no trail down there. I walked the rim for a 1/4 mile in both directions. There's no way down." And I couldn't make out the words. It was just the sound of talking, the rhythm of it, rising and falling. "Wind," I said. "Funneling through the narrows. It can sound like voices." "Yeah," Danny said. "That's what I figured." He didn't sound like that's what he figured. I almost told him about Vernon's journal, about the visitors, about the feeling at my window. I opened my mouth and the words were right there, and then Marcus walked in carrying a box and said something about the shed padlock, and the moment passed. and Danny went back to helping Elena, and the afternoon continued, and I said nothing. I said nothing. I need you to sit with that for a second, because what happened that night might have gone differently if I had spoken. If I had said, Danny, I felt something too. If I had said, Elena, what did your grandmother know? If I had said, Marcus, we need to leave. But I didn't. I stayed quiet because quiet was easier. Because rationality was a warm blanket I wasn't ready to throw off. Because admitting something was wrong meant admitting that the world had rules I didn't understand. So I said nothing. And then night came. It came the way it comes in the desert, fast and total. 1 minute the sky was orange and the mesas were burning with the last light. And the next the stars were out, more than I'd ever seen. The Milky Way so dense and bright it looked painted on, and the temperature dropped 20 degrees in 30 minutes and our breath came out in clouds. Marcus had built a fire in the pit outside. We sat around it, Marcus, Danny, me. Elena was inside cleaning the last of the kitchen shelves. The fire was good. The warmth was good. Danny had a beer and was coming back to himself, telling a story about a coworker, his voice finding its usual rhythm. Marcus was poking the fire with a stick and adding commentary. I was leaning back in a camp chair, looking at the stars, feeling for the first time since we'd arrived something close to peace. It was a little after 10 when I noticed the silence. It didn't arrive suddenly this time. It crept in. The fire crackled, and we talked, and beyond us the night had sounds, the wind in the sage, something small rustling in the scrub, the distant heartbeat of the windmill. And then, gradually, the way a tide goes out, those sounds withdrew, one by one. The wind stopped, the rustling stopped, the windmill stopped. I noticed because the fire seemed louder, not because it was burning harder, but because there was nothing else left to compete with it. Just the fire and our voices, and beyond that, a silence so complete it had texture, weight, presence. I was about to say something when it happened. From the canyon maybe 200 yards out, maybe less, somewhere in the blackness past the rim where the earth fell away into nothing, I heard Danny's voice. Not a voice like Danny's. Not a similar voice. Not an echo or a distortion or a trick of the wind. Danny's voice. His exact pitch, his exact cadence, the particular way he shaped his vowels. The slight rasp he got when he'd been talking for a while. Danny's voice, coming from the darkness, saying his own name. Danny, then my name. Hey, come here. I turned to look at Danny. He was sitting 3 feet to my left. His beer was in his hand. His mouth was closed. His face, I will never forget his face. The color left it so fast, it was like watching something drain. His skin went from firelight amber to gray in 2 seconds. His eyes went wide and his lips parted and he looked at me. And the expression on his face was not fear. Not yet. It was incomprehension. The total, system-crashing failure of reality to behave the way it was supposed to. That's, he whispered, that's me. Marcus stood up. He was facing the canyon, every muscle in his body tensed. His chin jutted out in that way he had when he was about to confront something. "Who's out there?" he shouted. His voice went out into the darkness and nothing came back, not even an echo. The canyon swallowed it. Then Danny's voice again, from the dark. Closer this time, not 200 yards, maybe 100. Moving toward us without any sound of footsteps, without any sound of movement at all. Just a voice, relocating, like something sliding through the black. "Danny, hey, come here, come here." But this time, something was wrong with it. The words were right. The voice was right. But the rhythm was off, slightly, like someone who had learned the words phonetically, who could reproduce every frequency and tone with perfect fidelity, but didn't understand what speech was. The pauses were in the wrong places. The emphasis landed a half beat late. It was Danny's voice the way a photograph is a person identical in every detail and completely, terrifyingly empty. Danny's beer slipped from his hand. It hit the dirt and foamed and he didn't notice. The back door opened. Elena was standing in the frame, backlit by the lantern inside. She'd heard it. I could tell by her face, not surprise, not confusion, confirmation. The look of someone who had been waiting for something and hoping it wouldn't come. She said one word. Inside. We went inside. Marcus started to argue. We should check. We should... And Elena cut him off with a voice I'd never heard from her, low and flat and absolute. Inside. Now. She closed the door, locked it, drew the curtain across the window, moved to the next window, drew that curtain too. She was methodical, quick, like she was running a procedure she'd been taught a long time ago. Marcus was rigid. Elena, what the hell is going on? She stopped. She was standing in the center of the room, and in the bad light of the lantern, her face was all angles and shadows, and her hands were shaking. I could see them shaking, fine tremors running through her fingers, but her voice was steady. Where I grew up, she said, there are things you don't talk about. Not because they're superstition, not because they're stories, because talking about them gives them attention, and attention is what they want. She looked at each of us. You need to understand something right now. Whatever is out there, it is not Danny. It is not a person. It is not an animal. It is not anything you have a word for. And the single worst thing you can do, the only thing that truly puts us in danger, is answer it. The room was silent. The lantern hissed. Answer it? Marcus said. I yelled at it. I know, Elena said. Don't do it again. Danny was sitting on the couch, arms folded across his chest, hands gripping his own shoulders. He wasn't looking at any of us. He was looking at the wall that faced the canyon, and he was listening. The voice called twice more, further away now, moving along the rim, east to west, like something pacing. The second time, it tried something different, not words, but Danny's laugh. That specific, slightly too loud, full-body laugh that was so essentially Danny that hearing it come from the darkness outside felt like watching someone peel off his face and wear it. Then it stopped. The silence returned, not empty this time, but loaded, pressurized, like the air before lightning. We sat in that room until dawn. Nobody slept. Nobody spoke much. Marcus sat against the door with Vernon's empty rifle across his knees, watching the curtains. Elena sat with her eyes closed, her lips moving occasionally, and words I couldn't hear. Danny didn't move from the couch, didn't speak, didn't look at anyone. At one point, around 4 a.m, I sat down beside him. I didn't say anything, I just sat there. After a long time, Danny said, very quietly, without looking at me. It had my voice, not like my voice, my voice. How does something have my voice? I didn't answer. I didn't have an answer. I still don't. Dawn came like a reprieve from a sentence. The light crept across the floor, and the fire in the pit outside had burned to white ash, and the sky was enormous and pale and empty. And the canyon was just a canyon again. And the world made sense again. In the fragile, provisional way that it does when you've seen the seams and know they can come apart. Marcus started talking about leaving almost immediately. Then he started talking about staying, then leaving again. I watched him oscillate not between options, but between identities. The Marcus who was afraid, and the Marcus who would rather die than admit he was afraid. They fought each other behind his eyes all morning. "There's an explanation," he said, pacing the main room. "Someone's out there, some person, messing with us, a local, maybe. Someone who doesn't want us on this property." "Using Danny's exact voice," I said. "Voice changers, speakers, I don't know. There's technology. Carried to the edge of a canyon in the middle of nowhere to prank 4 strangers cleaning out a dead man's house." Marcus stopped pacing. He looked at me the way he looked at me when we were kids, and I'd said something that undermined his authority. "So what's your explanation?" I didn't have one, that was the problem. I had no explanation that fit inside the world I understood, and I wasn't yet willing to step outside that world. Not in daylight. Not while Marcus was watching. "Elena said we should leave." She said it clearly, simply, without drama. "We get in the car, we drive to the highway, we call someone to deal with the house. We don't come back." Marcus shook his head. "We've got half the house left. I promised Mom we'd..." "Marcus, we can finish today, leave tomorrow morning. I'm not driving 40 miles of dirt road in the dark." "Then we leave now. It's morning. We have all day." "And waste the whole trip? Come back again in 2 weeks? No." He crossed his arms. "We finish today. Pack tight. Leave at first light tomorrow. One more night." Elena stared at him. I recognized the look, the particular exhaustion of arguing with someone whose pride has more authority than their judgment. She turned to me. An appeal. "Help me." I should have sided with her. Every instinct I had, every animal impulse buried under years of rationality and socialization, was telling me to get in the car. But Marcus was my brother, and Marcus was certain, and I had spent my entire life deferring to Marcus's certainty, because it was easier than trusting my own doubt. "One more night," I said. "We finish today. We leave at dawn." Elena looked at me for a long moment, then she turned away. She didn't argue further. She knew she'd lost. Danny said nothing. He was standing by the window, looking out at the canyon. His hand was resting against his throat, fingers curled lightly around his own neck, and he was touching it the way you'd touch a bruise gently, as if confirming that something had been taken from there. "We should have left. If you take nothing else from this, take that. When something impossible happens, when the world shows you what it's hiding, you leave. You don't negotiate. You don't rationalize. You don't let pride or plans or the cost of the rental car make the decision. You leave. We didn't leave, and everything that happened after is on us." It was mid-afternoon and I was in Vernon's bedroom clearing the last of the bureau when I found it, behind the dresser, not hidden casually, pressed into the gap between the furniture and the stone wall, pushed back so far I had to move the entire dresser to reach it. A roll of paper tied with twine, and beneath it, a bundle wrapped in cloth. The paper was a hand-drawn map of the canyon system, detailed, meticulous. Vernon had mapped every branch, every alcove, every ledge and overhang. The line work was obsessive. He'd been down there, or at least he'd studied every inch from above. Most of the canyon was simply mapped, neutral, geological. But in several places, Vernon had marked red X's and written, in small, firm letters, "No." A dead-end branch. No. An alcove on the western wall? No. A deep overhang near the canyon's convergence point? No. And one area deeper than the rest, where three canyons met in a kind of junction. A place that on the map looked almost like the center of a web was circled, not once. Over and over, the pen tracing the same circle a dozen times, cutting into the paper. And inside the circle, one word, it. The cloth bundle held three things: a pouch of dried sage, brittle and fragrant, a smaller pouch of something powdery gray, fine-grained, faintly mineral, and a carved figure. It was small, maybe 4 inches, carved from dark wood, smooth with handling, an animal shape, 4 legs, a body, a head, but wrong. The proportions were off. The legs were too long, the body was too narrow, and there were too many joints, the limbs bent in places where limbs shouldn't bend. It looked like something that was pretending to be an animal, the way the voice in the canyon was pretending to be Danny. Close enough to recognize, wrong enough to feel your skin crawl. I brought it to Elena. I didn't show anyone else. She was in the kitchen packing dishes into a box. She looked up when I came in, saw the map in one hand and the figure in the other, and she went still, completely, totally still, like a deer that has heard a branch snap. She looked at the figure for a long time without touching it. Then she stepped back. One step, then another. She pressed her back against the counter and she said very quietly, "He was trying to protect this house." From what? She didn't answer immediately. She looked out the window, the one facing the canyon, and I saw her working through something. Some internal negotiation between what she'd been taught to keep silent and what she understood we needed to know. "There are things," she said slowly, "that the people who lived here, who have always lived here, understood about this land. Not believed, understood. The way you understand that fire burns, the way you understand that gravity pulls. Not faith, experience." She crossed her arms, uncrossed them, crossed them again. "There are entities. In the old stories, they don't have one name, they have descriptions. They exist in the space between animal and human, between alive and dead. They are old, older than the people who named them. And they learn." "Learn what?" "You. They learn you, your voice, your walk, your face. They listen until they can reproduce you perfectly, not to become you. Never to become you. To lure the people who love you, to call them out, to bring them close." The kitchen was very quiet. The late afternoon sun was slanting through the window, making a bright rectangle on the floor, and dust motes turned in the light like tiny planets. "Elena," I said. "What happened last night?" Danny's voice. "I know what it was," she said. "I've known since we got here. I knew when I saw the canyon. I knew when Harlan gave his warning. I knew before that I knew when Marcus first told me where the property was." She looked at me, and her eyes were bright with something that wasn't tears, but was close. "I should have said something. I should have refused to come. But I told myself I was being irrational. I told myself the stories were just stories. I told myself that what my grandmother taught me was superstition, and I was too educated, too modern, too rational to believe in it." She almost laughed. It was the saddest almost laugh I'd ever heard. "The thing your uncle carved, he was trying to represent it. What it looks like, or what it becomes when it's between shapes. When it's neither one thing nor the other." She looked at the figure on the counter between us. "He lived here for 30 years. He knew what was in the canyon, and he stayed anyway." I don't know if that makes him brave or broken. What do we do? I asked. We don't answer it. We don't go outside after dark. We don't look at it. Don't try to see it. And we leave. As soon as there is light in the sky, we leave and we do not come back. What if it... Don't. She held up a hand. Don't speculate. Don't wonder. And for the love of everything, don't say its name. Don't even think the word. That's not superstition. That's survival. I wanted to ask more. I had 100 questions. But Elena's face was closed. She had given me everything she was willing to give, and the cost of giving it was written in the tension of her shoulders and the tight line of her mouth. She had broken a silence that had been taught to her as sacred, and she had done it because she was afraid for us, and I understood that the kindest thing I could do was stop asking. I left the figure on the counter. Neither of us touched it again. The sun went down. We locked the doors, drew the curtains, lit the lanterns, sat in the main room, the four of us, close enough to touch. Marcus had Vernon's rifle across his knees again, still unloaded. I'd watched him search every drawer, every shelf, every box for ammunition, and find nothing. I wondered about that. Vernon had a rifle, but no bullets. A man who understood what was outside his walls had a weapon he couldn't fire. Was that despair? Acceptance? Or had he understood something we didn't? That a bullet wouldn't matter. Aliena had taken the dried sage from Vernon's bundle and placed it at the base of every door and window. She didn't explain. None of us asked. We had passed the point where explanations mattered. We were operating on instinct now, on the trust that Elena knew something we didn't, and her knowledge, however incomplete, however reluctant, was the only thing standing between us and whatever was out there. It came earlier tonight. Not full dark, not even close. The sky was still holding the last bruise of purple on the western horizon when the footsteps started. On the roof, slow, deliberate. The sound of weight, real, physical weight, on corrugated tin, not an animal. An animal would scrabble, would scratch, would move in bursts. This was walking, measured, patient. One step, then another, moving from the eastern end of the roof to the western end. A pause, then back again. We looked at the ceiling. The lantern light caught the dust sifting down from the beams with each step. Marcus's jaw was clenched so tight I could see the muscles jumping. His knuckles were white on the rifle stock. Danny was sitting beside me, and I could feel him trembling, not shaking. Trembling. A fine, constant vibration running through his entire body, like a plucked string. The footsteps stopped, then knocking. On the back door. 3 knocks, gentle, almost polite. The kind of knock a neighbor would give, a friend arriving unannounced, someone who expected to be welcomed. Nobody moved. 3 more knocks, same rhythm, same pressure, patient, unhurried. Then it stopped, and for a moment, maybe 30 seconds, there was nothing. Just the hiss of the lanterns and the sound of 4 people trying to breathe quietly. Then, from outside the front door, not the back, the front, which meant it had moved the entire length of the house in perfect silence. Marcus's voice. Marcus's voice, not mine, not Danny's, Marcus's. His pitch, his confidence, his particular way of emphasizing certain words. And it said, "Hey, open up, it's cold." Marcus's face did something I'd never seen. It collapsed. Not emotionally, structurally. Every piece of certainty, every scaffold of confidence and authority And I know better than you that made Marcus Marcus fell away in 2 seconds. What was underneath was a boy. A scared boy sitting in the dark, holding an empty rifle, listening to his own voice ask to be let in. He didn't speak. He couldn't. The voice tried again, Marcus's cadence, Marcus's tone, but with the same wrongness as before. The rhythm slightly off. The warmth mechanical. A performance of humanity by something that had studied it from the outside. Come on, let me in. Then silence. A long silence. I was counting my heartbeats. I got to 40. Then, from directly outside the window of the wall where Danny was sitting, close enough that whatever was producing the sound must have been inches from the glass, Danny's voice. But different now. Not calling, not asking, repeating. Exact phrases Danny had said that day, word for word, tone for tone. I thought I heard someone down in the canyon. A pause, like talking, a conversation. A pause. That's what I figured. Each phrase reproduced with perfect fidelity. Not imitation. Playback. As if something had been standing outside the house all day, recording every word, cataloging every sound, building a library of us. Danny broke, not loudly. There was no scream, no outburst. He folded forward, hands over his face, and he cried silently, his shoulders shaking, tears running through his fingers, and through his hands, in a whisper so small I almost missed it. It's been listening to us. The whole time. It's been right there, listening. Elena moved. She took the dried sage from the windowsills and crumbled it between her fingers, pressing the fragments into the seams of the door frames, the gaps in the window casings. She did it with her eyes closed. Her lips were moving a low, continuous murmur, words in a language I didn't recognize, a rhythm that sounded less like prayer and more like instruction, like she was telling the walls what to do. The sounds stopped, not gradually. They stopped the way they had the first night completely, instantly, a severance so total it felt physical. One moment the voice was there, and the next the night was empty, but not silent, because now, in the space where the voice had been, I could hear something else. And this was worse, breathing. Just outside the eastern wall, my wall. The wall I'd slept against the first night, the wall Harlan had examined. The wall behind which I'd felt that presence in the dark. Slow, wet breathing. Not labored, not winded, deliberate. In and out, in and out. Like something that didn't need to breathe but was doing it anyway. Because it wanted us to hear it. Because it wanted us to know it was there. Because it wanted us to understand the precise distance between its mouth and our skin. A few inches of stone. That's all. I pressed my hand against the wall. I don't know why. Some terrible, irresistible need to confirm that it was real. The stone was cold, and against my palm, faintly, I felt it a vibration. The wall was trembling. Not from wind, not from the house settling. From the breath on the other side, I pulled my hand away and didn't touch the wall again. The breathing continued until sometime after 2. Then it stopped, and the night sounds returned: wind, insects, the distant creak of the windmill, and the pressure in the room eased, and the air felt breathable again, and whatever had been pressed against the house withdrew into the canyon, or the dark, or wherever it went, when it wasn't feeding on us. Aliena opened her eyes. She looked exhausted, emptied, like whatever she'd been doing had cost her something physical. "It's gone," she said. "For now." Danny hadn't moved. He was still sitting in the same position, hands on his face, but he'd stopped crying. He was just still. When I gently pulled his hands away, his eyes were open, staring at nothing, and for a moment, just a flicker, just a fraction of a second, I saw something in them that I couldn't explain. A distance, as if Danny was still in there, but further back than he should have been. As if something had pushed him deeper into himself to make room. Then he blinked, focused, looked at me. "I'm okay," he said. He wasn't. None of us were. I've thought a lot about what happened to Danny on that last day. I've turned it over in my mind the way you turn a stone in your hand, feeling for the edge, the crack, the place where something got in. I don't have an answer. I have observations, and the observations scare me more than anything that came through the dark. He was different in the morning, not in a way I could point to and say, "There, that's wrong." It was subtler than that. Danny was present. He responded when spoken to. He helped pack boxes. He ate breakfast. He moved through the house and did the things a person does. But the animation was gone. The warmth that was so fundamentally Danny, the low-frequency hum of humor and kindness and restless energy that made him the person everyone wanted in the room, had been turned down, not off, down, like a radio between stations, still making sound but not making sense. He stood at the window a lot. That was the thing I noticed most. Danny, who couldn't sit still for 5 minutes, who paced and fidgeted and drummed his fingers on every surface. Danny stood at the window facing the canyon for long stretches. 5 minutes, 10, 15. Perfectly still, his breath fogging the glass, his eyes focused on something I couldn't see. Not the landscape, not the mesas, or the sky, or the distant edge of the rim. Something closer, or something further. Something that existed on a frequency the rest of us couldn't receive. I watched him from across the room. Marcus was in the shed, making final trips with boxes. Eleanor was in the kitchen, systematically wrapping dishes, and every few minutes she would glance at Danny with an expression I couldn't read. Not fear exactly, but attention. The vigilant, unblinking attention of someone watching a wound for signs of infection. Around 11, Danny walked outside. He didn't announce it, didn't say he needed air or wanted to stretch his legs. He just stood up from the window and walked to the door and opened it and went out, smooth, fluid, like a thought completing itself. I followed. He was walking toward the canyon, not fast, not with urgency. A slow, steady walk, his arms at his sides, his head slightly tilted, the way you tilt your head when you're listening to something faint. The sun was high and the light was brutal, and the canyon ahead of him was a dark gash in the earth. And he was walking toward it the way water moves toward a drain. "Danny." He didn't stop. "Danny." He stopped, 10 feet from the rim, maybe 12. Close enough that the ground was already starting to crumble, the sandstone fractured and unreliable. The kind of edge where one wrong step means you don't get a second one. He turned around. And for one fraction of a second, one sliver of time so thin I can't be sure it happened. Except that I am sure, I am absolutely sure, something looked at me through Danny's eyes that was not Danny. It's hard to describe. It wasn't a change in the color of his eyes or the shape of his face. Everything was physically identical, but behind it, behind the familiar features, behind the brown eyes I'd known since we were 12, something else was present. Something patient. Something that had been watching through those eyes for hours, maybe longer, and was now, in this unguarded moment, allowing itself to be seen. Not out of carelessness, out of curiosity. It wanted to see what I would do. Then Danny blinked, and he was Danny again, fully, completely. The warmth flickered back on, dim but real, and he looked at me with confusion and a little embarrassment, the way you look at someone who's caught you sleepwalking. "Sorry," he said. "Just looking." He walked back toward the house. He passed me and I smelled something faint, almost imaginary. Not Danny's smell. Something mineral, something old, like wet stone in a place that hasn't seen sunlight in a very long time. Then it was gone and the air smelled like sage and dust, and Danny was inside, and the moment was over. I didn't tell anyone what I'd seen. I should have. I should have grabbed Elena and said, "Something is wrong with Danny. Something is inside him, or on him, or near him. And it looked at me and it is not human and we need to help him." But I didn't say it because saying it meant believing it. And believing it meant the world was not what I thought it was. And I was not ready, not even after everything, to let go of that last handhold on the rationale. So I said nothing. Again. And again it mattered. And again I carry it. We packed the SUV. Everything we were taking was loaded by 3 in the afternoon. The house was mostly empty now, stripped of Vernon's possessions, reduced to stone walls and bare shelves, and the faint ghost smell of a man who had lived alone with something terrible for 30 years. We'd leave at first light. 5:45, Marcus said, before full sunrise. The moment there was enough gray in the sky to see the road. One more night, that was all. 12 hours of darkness, and then the road and the highway and cell service and the world, the real world. The bright and noisy and populated world where things made sense. And the dark was just the dark, and voices belonged to the people who spoke them. 12 hours. The sunset, when it came, was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. The sky turned colors I didn't know the sky could turn. Gold deepened to amber, amber to copper, copper to a red, so saturated it looked liquid. And then the canyon that wound in the earth, that black mouth filled with light. Every layer of sandstone caught the sun and burned. The walls glowed like heated metal, and the shadows between them turned violet, then indigo, then a blue so deep it was almost black. And the whole landscape looked like something painted by a dying god. Extravagant, impossible, the kind of beauty that makes you forget, for just a moment, that you're afraid. Danny stood at the window, watching. Marcus stood on the porch, his hands in his pockets, his face soft in a way I rarely saw. Even Elena came to look. She stood in the doorway with her arms crossed, and the light caught the tears on her face, not crying, just tears, the involuntary kind, the kind the body produces when something is too much. It was beautiful, and it felt like a trap. I don't know how else to say it. The beauty felt intentional, designed, like the landscape was performing for us, putting on its best face, saying, "Look at me, come closer, stand at the edge. Just a little closer, just a little longer." The canyon filled with golden light, and the golden light said, "Come," and some part of me, some ancient, limbic, pre-verbal part, understood that the beauty was a lure. That something wanted us looking at the canyon, wanted us standing at the rim, wanted us outside. "Inside," Elena said quietly, "before the light goes." We went inside. She closed the door. The sun dropped below the mesa and the gold vanished. And the canyon went dark, and the house was a stone box in the middle of nowhere, and the last night began. It came before full dark. The sky still held a faint gray-violet bruise on the western horizon when the first voice reached us. Danny's voice, from the canyon. Then Marcus's voice from the east. Then, and this is the moment my hands started shaking so hard I had to press them between my knees. My voice. My own voice, coming from somewhere behind the house, calling from the darkness in my exact pitch, my exact rhythm, saying, "Help me, please, help me." I heard myself begging for help from a place I was not, and something inside me, some foundation, some load-bearing wall of identity, cracked. Because your voice is you. Your voice is the most intimate thing you own. It is the sound of your thoughts made physical, the vibration of your specific body, your specific lungs, your specific throat, and hearing it stolen, hearing it used without your permission, spoken by something that is not you and has never been you, and is using your most personal possession as bait, is a violation so profound that I don't have a word for it. Theft doesn't cover it. Assault doesn't cover it. It's something deeper, something older, something that touches the part of you that knows who you are and makes you wonder if you're wrong. Then a new voice, one we didn't recognize, older, thinner, a voice with the texture of dry paper, speaking from the canyon in a language none of us knew. The syllables rose and fell in patterns that weren't quite speech, weren't quite singing, something in between, something that predated both. Elena covered her ears, not casually. She slammed her hands over her ears and doubled over and made a sound, a small, wounded sound. And I understood that she recognized something in those syllables. Not the language, the intent. "Don't listen," she said. Her voice was muffled behind her hands. "Whatever it's saying, don't listen. Don't try to understand it. Let it be noise." The generator died. No sputter, no warning. The light went out and the hum went silent, and the house was plunged into darkness so complete I couldn't see my own hand. The only light was a thin thread of gray from the gap beneath the front door, the last of the twilight, already fading. Marcus cursed, fumbled for the lantern. Couldn't find it. I heard him knocking things over in the dark, heard Elena's breathing, rapid and shallow. Heard Danny's silence, and Danny's silence was the loudest thing in the room. I found the lantern, lit it. The flame caught, and the shadows leaped, and in the sudden light I saw everyone's face, and every face was wrong, too pale, too drawn, too old. We had aged 10 years in 2 days. Then the footsteps, circling the house. Not on the roof this time, on the ground, right outside the walls. A continuous, steady circuit front, east side, back, west side, front again. Around and around. The footfall was heavy, deliberate, and wrong. The rhythm wasn't quite bipedal. Too many beats per stride. As if whatever was walking had more legs than it should. Or as if its legs bent in places that created extra impacts with the ground. Around and around and around. Nobody spoke. We sat in the lantern light and listened to something circle us like a predator circling a cage. And I thought about Vernon. 30 years. 30 years of this. Every night, or almost every night, for 30 years. No phone, no neighbors, no one to tell. Just the stone walls and the sage and the empty rifle and the carved figure of the thing he could hear but must never see. Had he talked to it? In the end, after 30 years of silence, had the loneliness been worse than the danger? Had he answered? Is that what the last entry meant? It knows my voice now. Not that it had learned his voice by listening, but that he had given it? That he had spoken into the dark, and the dark had spoken back, and in the exchange something had been traded that could not be returned. The footsteps stopped. The front door handle turned, slowly, mechanically. the knob rotating to its full extent, the latch clicking, the door pressing inward against the deadbolt. Not violently, not with force, with patience. The steady, unhurried pressure of something that understands locks and is simply testing whether this one will hold. It held. The handle returned to its resting position. Silence. 5 minutes. 10. The kind of silence that is a held breath, a coiled spring, a drawn bowstring. The kind of silence that is not absence, but preparation. Then Danny stood up. He stood up the way a marionette stands smoothly, without the small adjustments a person makes, without shifting weight or pushing off with his hands. One moment, he was sitting. The next, he was vertical. His eyes were open, but they were not seeing us. They were seeing something else. Something past the walls, past the dark. Something that was calling him in a register we couldn't hear. He walked toward the back door. "Danny." My voice came out strangled. "Danny, stop." He didn't stop. He didn't speed up. He walked with the same measured, patient pace as the footsteps that had circled the house. His hand reached for the deadbolt. Marcus got there first. He grabbed Danny's arm and Danny fought. Not like Danny fought, not with the clumsy, half-hearted resistance of a person who doesn't want to be held. With strength. A locked, rigid, mechanical strength that didn't match his body, that came from somewhere deeper than muscle. His face was blank. His eyes were open and empty, and his mouth was moving lips shaping words with no sound. A continuous, silent articulation of something that looked in the lantern light, like the same syllables the voice in the canyon had spoken. Elena was there. She grabbed Danny's other arm. I grabbed his waist. The three of us held him, and he fought, silently, relentlessly, with a force that took all three of us to contain. His fingers scraped the deadbolt, missed by inches. Elena was speaking, close to Danny's ear, the same words she'd murmured while placing the sage, low, rhythmic, insistent. Not a prayer, a command. A voice speaking to something inside Danny and telling it, in no uncertain terms, to let go. Danny's body went slack. He collapsed. We caught him, lowered him to the floor. He gasped, a raw, desperate, drowning gasp, the sound of someone breaking the surface after too long underwater. His eyes refocused. He looked at us, at me, at Marcus, at Elena, and his face was pure confusion and pure terror and something else. Something worse. Recognition. He knew what had happened. He had been aware the entire time, present, but powerless, watching from inside his own body as something else used it. "It was pulling me," he whispered. His voice was cracked and thin, barely there. I could hear it, not outside. Inside my chest, like a hand around my heart, pulling me toward the door. And I could feel what was on the other side. I could feel it wanting. "Wanting what?" Marcus asked. His voice was shaking. The man who never admitted fear was shaking. Danny looked at him. In. Outside, something screamed. Not a voice, not any voice we'd heard. Not Danny's or Marcus's or mine or Vernon's. Something else entirely. A sound that existed in the space between human and animal, between vocal cords and something more fundamental. A sound that seemed to come from the earth itself, from the canyon, from the bedrock. A cry of rage or hunger or frustration that had no right to exist in a world governed by physics and biology and reason. It was the sound of something that had been patient for a very long time, and had just had its prize pulled from its hands. The sound lasted maybe 5 seconds. It filled the house. It filled my chest. It filled my skull. I felt it in my teeth, in my bones, in the spaces between my thoughts. Elena pressed her hands to her ears again. Marcus covered his face. Danny curled into himself on the floor and went small, went fetal, went as close to invisible as a human body can get. Then footsteps, moving away, toward the canyon, fast, faster than walking, faster than running. The rhythm of something with too many legs covering ground with terrifying speed. The sound diminishing, receding, dropping over the edge of the rim and down into the canyon, down into the dark, down into whatever place at the bottom of the world that thing called home. Then nothing. The silence that followed was different from every silence that had come before. It was empty. Truly, genuinely empty. The pressurized, predatory quality was gone. The attention was gone. Whatever had been focused on us, on Danny specifically, on the weakest point in our perimeter, had withdrawn, not defeated. I want to be clear about that. Not beaten, not repelled, not driven away. It had chosen to leave. And that distinction matters because something that can be defeated is limited. Something that chooses is not. The night sounds returned. Wind, insects, the windmill. The ordinary, blessed, unbearable sounds of a world that doesn't know what lives in its margins. We held Danny, the three of us, on the floor in the lantern light. We held him and we didn't speak and we waited for the sky to change. It took 4 hours. I counted everyone. When the first gray light bled into the eastern horizon, Marcus said, "Now." And we moved. We didn't speak. We didn't check the house. We didn't lock the door. We left Vernon's boxes, left the maps, left the carved figure on the kitchen counter, left everything. Elena carried the sage. Danny walked between Marcus and me, our hands on his shoulders, guiding him like a man who'd lost his sight. He was present. He was Danny, but something in his coordination was off. Something in his proprioception, as if his body was a house he'd been pushed out of and was now re-entering room by room. The SUV started on the first try. Marcus drove. I sat beside Danny in the back. Elena rode shotgun, turned sideways in her seat so she could see all of us. The dirt road unspooled ahead, 43 miles of hardpan and sage, and the slow return of the ordinary world. Nobody spoke for the first 20 miles. The landscape scrolled past mesas, washes, the occasional cottonwood. The same terrain that had felt adventurous on the way in and now felt like a gauntlet we were running. I watched the mirrors. Behind us, dust. Nothing else. Just the road and the dust and the distance growing between us and the canyon. At mile 25, Elena made a phone call. Cell service had returned 1 bar, then 2. The fragile reconnection with the world of signals and satellites and human infrastructure. She spoke quietly, turned toward the window, in a language I didn't know. Navajo, I think, though I can't be sure. The conversation lasted less than 2 minutes. When she hung up, her face was drawn but calmer, as if she had transferred a weight to someone equipped to carry it. Marcus glanced at her. What was that? Someone will come take care of the house. What does that mean? Elena looked at him steadily. It means we're not selling it. I expected Marcus to argue, to invoke our mother, the estate, the money, the logistics. He didn't. He looked at the road and he drove and he didn't say another word about the property. Not then. Not ever. We reached the highway. The pavement felt like a threshold, a border between whatever jurisdiction held that canyon and the jurisdiction of the human world. I looked back one last time. The mesa where Vernon's property sat was visible from the highway, a flat-topped shape against the brightening sky, miles away now, already losing detail. And on the rim, the very edge of the rim, where the earth fell away into the canyon, a figure. Tall, still, upright, not moving, not waving, not doing anything a person does, just standing. A dark vertical line against the pale sky, perfectly motionless, watching us drive away. I looked for maybe 3 seconds, then the road curved and the mesa turned and the figure was gone and we were on the highway and the world closed around us like water closing over a stone. Danny saw it too. I know because he made a small sound, not a word, just a sound, a tight exhalation through his nose. And then he turned away from the window and looked at his hands and didn't look back again. That was 7 months ago. I need to tell you what happened after, because the after is where the real horror lives. Not in the canyon, not in the dark, not in the voices or the footsteps or the screaming. In the after. Marcus never talks about it. I've tried twice, and both times he changed the subject with a speed and finality that told me everything. He hasn't been camping since, hasn't been hiking, hasn't spent a single night anywhere without solid walls and locked doors and the noise of other human beings. He and Elena broke up 3 months after we came back. It was mutual, Elena said, but I don't think that's entirely true. I think Marcus couldn't look at her without remembering, and remembering was something Marcus had decided he would not do. Elena moved back to Farmington. She called me once, about a month after the breakup. She said she'd gone to see her grandmother. She said her grandmother had listened to the whole story and hadn't been surprised. Not by any of it. She'd nodded in the places Elena expected her to nod, and she'd been quiet in the places Elena expected her to be quiet. And at the end, she'd said something that Elena repeated to me in a voice so low I had to press the phone to my ear. It didn't follow you because it didn't need to. It already has what it wanted. I asked Elena what that meant. She said she didn't know. Then she said goodbye, and I haven't heard from her since. Danny changed. That's the part that keeps me up at night. The part I go back to when the world is quiet and there's nothing between me and my thoughts. He's not broken. He's not traumatized in the way you'd expect. No nightmares, no panic attacks, no dramatic symptoms you could point to and say, this person went through something. He's just less. The volume is permanently lower. The warmth is still there, but it flickers now, intermittent, like a bulb with a loose connection. He doesn't tell stories the way he used to. He doesn't laugh the way he used to. He goes quiet in the middle of conversations and stares at a point in the middle distance. And when you say his name, it takes him a beat too long to come back. He doesn't go outside after dark, not dramatically. He doesn't announce it, doesn't make a thing of it. He just doesn't. If we're at a restaurant and it's getting late, he'll suggest leaving before nightfall. If he's at home and the sun is setting, the doors are locked and the curtains are drawn by the time the last light fades. He sleeps with every light in his apartment on, every single one. He called me once, 2 a.m, 4 months after we came back. I picked up and his voice was very small and very calm, and he said, "Do you ever hear it? At night, when it's really quiet?" I paused, I closed my eyes, and I lied. "No," I said, "I don't hear anything." "Okay," Danny said. "Okay, good." He hung up, I sat in the dark with the phone in my hand, and I listened to the silence in my apartment, and I heard it. Of course I heard it. I've been hearing it since we came back. Not a voice, not a call, not the breathing or the footsteps or the scream. The hum. That low, sub-audible vibration. From the first night, the one I'd felt in my chest. The one that seemed to come from the bedrock itself. It was there, faint, constant, like a frequency that had been tuned to match something inside me. A resonance between whatever lived in that canyon and whatever it had touched in the dark. I keep a fan running now, all the time. A white noise machine on my nightstand and a fan at the foot of my bed. And the television on low in the living room, even when I'm not watching. I need the noise. I need something between me and the silence, because the silence is where it lives. And in the silence I can hear it calling. And the worst part, the thing I have never said out loud until now, is that sometimes I want to answer. I called Harlan 2 months after we came back. The number Elena found in Vernon's papers. It was disconnected. No forwarding number, no voicemail. Just the flat, final tone of a line that no longer exists. I tried to find the property on satellite maps. I spent an entire weekend hunched over my laptop, tracing the route we'd taken, following the dirt roads from the highway into the backcountry. The roads don't match. I don't mean they've changed. I mean the topography doesn't correspond to what I remember. The mesas are in the wrong places. The washes run in the wrong directions. The canyon, that enormous, undeniable geological fact, doesn't appear where it should. The land has rearranged itself, or my memory has been rearranged, or the place was never on any map to begin with, and the road we drove only existed because something wanted us to find it. I don't know what was out there. I don't know if it was what Elena was afraid to name, or something older, or something we don't have a category for. I don't know if it was malevolent or simply alien, operating on imperatives so far from human understanding that concepts like good and evil don't apply. I don't know if Vernon lived with it for 30 years or if Vernon was kept by it for 30 years. I don't know if the house was his refuge or his cage. I know this. It didn't follow us home. It didn't have to. It put something inside each of us that night. A splinter, a seed, a frequency, whatever you want to call it. Something that lives in the space between thought and silence, between sleep and waking, between the person I was before that canyon and the person I am now. And some nights, not every night, but enough when the fan stops or the power flickers, or the world goes quiet enough for just a moment, I can feel it. Not hearing exactly, not sound exactly. Something deeper, something in the architecture of my chest, in the rhythm of my heartbeat, in the hum of my blood. It's still calling. And the thing that terrifies me, the thing that wakes me at 3 a.m. and puts me in front of this screen trying to tell strangers what happened to us, is that it's getting louder. Not much, not fast, but louder. And I don't know what happens when it gets loud enough.